Welcome everyone to the Feeding Birds and Project Feederwatch webinar brought to you by the Orange Audubon Society in cooperation with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology K-12 Education Program. We're glad you're here. Orange Audubon's mission is to promote public understanding of and interest in wildlife and the environment that supports it. Cornell Lab's mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. K-12 mission is to create innovative resources and training that build science skills and inspire young people to connect to their local habitats. There's a lot of resources with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's K-12 outreach. There's a lot of free programs that you can download. There's educator training, and some other things. Check out their website. So the purpose of Cornell K-12 programs is to engage students, get them exploring their natural environment around them, and which leads to inquiry, which is science. So why choose a project to feed birds? You can think about, here we have a scene that doesn't look much like Florida if you're from Florida, and then more like Florida winter. So a feeder is going to bring the birds to you in your classroom. Feeding birds is exciting. It's real world, authentic science. It's an opportunity for your students to study wild animals. It's low cost. You can do it year round if you choose to. It does help the birds. It definitely sparks kids' curiosity, and it connects the kids to the local environment. They start learning what's really living around them. And why choose birds as a project to study for students? Well, birds are everywhere. Once you start looking, you will start seeing them wherever you go. Maybe not that many, but you'll see them. So here's some basics. There's different types of feeders. So when you're thinking about starting a project, you can consider there's tube feeders, have the little perches for many birds to perch on. There's nectar feeders, if you're interested in hummingbirds, if you have them in your area. There's suet feeders, which is particularly good in the fall and the winter and the early spring. And there's platform feeders. So you want to research and maybe even make your students part of the process if you decide to feed birds of what type of feeder you want to use. And you can actually try multiple feeders. That sounds like a science experiment to me. And here's some photographs of the different types of feeders. Some are designed like for holding whole nuts. And then we have our nectar feeder. This is like a handmade. You can get a log and you can make holes and you can do homemade suet and put it in there. And there's some different types of little trays. This one has a cover on it so the feed won't get as wet if you have light rain or snow or things like that. So different birds prefer different types of seeds, but generally, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, most birds will eat black oil sunflower seed. So if you don't want to mess around with a lot of different things, that's a pretty good seed that many birds will eat. What if you want to do this at your school and your school says you can't use feeders? Or what if you live in an area where there's black bears and the black bears will like to come to the feeders? You can use native plantings. Here's a painted bunting. This is Biden's alba, and the painted bunting enjoys the seeds from that plant. So it would still be attracted to that area if you have the right type of plants. You can also use bird baths and things like that, a water source. This is a summer tanager, very attracted to the water to drink and bathe. It is not a seed eater, so that's how I got it to my garden. So here's the website for Project Feederwatch, And I'm going to walk you through the website so you can see kind of how to navigate and what resources are there for you. And why do Project Feederwatch? Well, it's going to engage your students in community science. They're contributing. It's going to teach your students scientific protocols because there's certain ways that the project must be done. It's not complicated, but it definitely will teach you that you have to do it in a certain way. And it encourages inquiry because as you're watching the birds that come or don't come to your feeder, students are going to ask questions and then try new things and learn about the scientific process. So if you go to the Project Feederwatch website, you're going to see all kinds of information here that will help you in being successful in feeding birds. One of the tabs is a food and feeder preferences of common feeder birds. And so if you click on that, you're going to pull up a list and you can filter it, which is wonderful. So I can filter it for the Southeast. I can filter it for all types of food. I can filter it, oh, I only want to use black oil sunflower seeds. I can filter it that way. I can filter it by what type of feeder I want to use. This would be good in planning of what type of feeder because maybe you can decide, well, what kind of birds do we want to attract that live in our area? It's a great way to approach this. So let's say your students want to bring Baltimore Orioles and they live in your area or they visit certain times. So you can see, yeah, you can find them in the Southeast if you're here in Florida. You can see they like suet, sugar water, and fruit. And you can see the type of feeders to use, platform and nectar feeders. Also contained on the Project Feederwatch website are simple plans on students making feeders, even, upcycling, soda bottles and things like that. There's other information about like how far should you place your feeder from the window. This is a big deal because birds do strike the windows, especially if you have a feeder near a window. And this is an interesting information. If the feeder is closer than 5 meters to the window, that's too close. If it's really close, like it's on the window or less than a meter, that's okay because the birds can't build up speed to hit the window. So this is there on the website and you can decide on what would be the correct placement for your feeder. Okay, our favorite little furry friends. What about squirrels? Well, there's some things you can do. Baffles that you can buy or create. And you definitely want to keep the feeders 10 feet from anything that the squirrel can jump off of, whether it's the side of a building or a tree, because they're great little acrobats. All right, there's a community tab in Project Feederwatch. And if you click on that, they have useful information on things such as how to defer squirrels. So this was one person's idea and they used slinkies and some string and they had success with it. So check out that community tab. Well, when should you feed birds? Well, you can feed birds all year round if you want to. It's going to definitely create opportunities for discussion if the feeders are outside your window, as mine were when I had a classroom. When birds visited and we had windows we could look out, we could take just a brief moment to say, oh, look what's here, and we could track it and then talk about it when we had the appropriate time. And students will ask questions. They'll notice the feeders when they're walking to and from class too. You want to think about the setup. If you look at this, there's a reason why birds are not coming to this feeder. Do you see the reason down here? This is my own yard. This hawk decided that it just wanted to hang out here for a while, maybe get an easy snack. So, you have something like this happen. You can talk to the students, and this is the time that you take down the feeders temporarily and let the hawk find a new feeding place, and it will. So something to consider when you're setting up a feeding area, whether you're using native plants or you're using feeding stations or both, is talk to your students about habitat. And that habitat is a place where living things live, and it's made up of food, water, cover, and space. So in your feeding program, you want to try to provide all of those if possible. And ask your students, well, is the city a habitat? Actually, I was in a class today and they didn't think it was. And then we talked about, well, does it have food, water, cover, and space? If it does, it is a habitat. It might not be the most ideal habitat for all living things, but there are birds that make city their home. So you can talk about your students. Well, we have a school garden. Is this a habitat? Sure. Food, water, shelter, and space. So you can actually have your students create a plan on where to put the feeders, on other items that, water source. Is there a place for cover? Do you need to maybe plant some small trees or bushes or make use of existing buildings? And this is a great thing. And this could be a kind of a long-term project to really work on and involve your students, and then they'll really take ownership in it as well. You can even make on the computer a habitat map. And here's some student designed habitats that they created for feeding birds. And then put your plan into action, have the students work, do a after school, or like what I did at my school, we did it as a beautification day. We got lots of families involved. All right, for Project Feederwatch, once you have a feeding area, whether it's with native plants or bird feeders, you're going to do the following things. You're going to count the birds that visit, and you have to count them 2 consecutive days in a row, and record that. And you record the highest number of species that come between the 2 consecutive days. You don't have to count all day. You can count. And when you upload your data, it asks you how long you counted, whether it was for an hour or 6 hours or whatever it was. And then you enter your data online. So this was my old classroom. We had a little table set up where the student was finished, or if we saw something, I could send someone back and they could record it, and then I could input it in later. And now they even have an app. You can do it on a phone. So Project Feederwatch has started for the year. It runs November 1st through April 30th, but you can start it up now. It's okay. You can, if you can't start it till January, start it in January. For each count, you select 2 consecutive days, as often as once a week, or you can only do it once a month. That's okay. But the more you do it, the more data you get. And your data is valuable. They publish a lot of information on what they learned from our feeders. If you can't identify a bird, it's like, oh my goodness, we saw this hummingbird with a purple throat. Pretty cool, right? On the website, go to the Learn tab, and they have some information on identifying birds. So our next webinar coming up is on how to count birds for science, which is a slightly separate topic. Feederwatch is a particular type of count. We're going to talk about doing a count where you're not necessarily looking at a feeder. Now, if you want a head start on having a feeder, there's a way for you to get 4 window feeders for your school, and here's how you get them. You're going to go to the Feathered Friends curriculum, which is at this website. So this recording will be available later, and go to this website for Cornell K-12, Feathered Friends, and when you download the lessons, then you'll be brought to a link where you can, down here, where you can get the free window feeder. You just have to pay the shipping to your school. And that way you could share with other teachers as well. You could do maybe a grade level project with feeding birds. So if you want more information about the Feathered Friends curriculum, you can watch our recorded webinar on the YouTube channel. And it's there from earlier this year. And if you have any questions, you can email me at education@orangeaudubon and I'd be happy to help you. So everyone have a good night and enjoy feeding birds with your students. Thank you.